Bam! What is going on, folks? MC is in the house. Start off with the usual masterchim.com. Go there and put your email in. I am going to mute my damn monitor. All right, well, now that that's handled, masterchim.com, that gives you access to the Master Chim letter, which is my daily email newsletter. It is 100% free. Put your email in, and I will send you emails every single day. And I'll talk about stuff that people who follow my stuff tend to or want to talk about. And I don't share emails. I don't sell emails, anything like that. My membership site is thewarriorproject.com. Registration's closed at the moment, so I don't know why I'm sharing that. But pretty much every single relevant link is going to be in the description, whether you're watching it on YouTube or Facebook. So what is going on in the world? So a couple things to talk about. Number one, it seems as though there is going to be a vote of significance on a proposed gun bill that was supported by Republicans, some Republicans, along with the obvious, supporters, the Democrats. And a lot of people are up in arms at the betrayal of these Republicans from, this pretty consistent position that's usually been on the Republican side of the aisle, where, gun control is something that we understand that it's really just trying to take away rights of the individual citizens and their ability to protect themselves. One of the things that people, I don't want to sit here and rail on about the Second Amendment. We could do that, but that's not my intention. But just wanted to say a common thing that you'll hear with people talking about the Second Amendment is a concession in their position, in that they want to argue in support of the Second Amendment by saying, in my ability to bear arms is really, about my ability to protect myself, and all this is true, the human right, the God-given right of being able to just protect me and my family, that is supported, and protected in the Bill of Rights. And I think you're really beating around the bush if that's your position. If you're somebody who discusses the Second Amendment in the capacity of, the reason why we have it, or, the fact that it is, listed in the Constitution, I think that we pretty much just have to say the Second Amendment is there. So if the government gets crazy, we could shoot them and kill them. It's if the government takes rights away from its citizens and becomes a tyranny, and starts infringing upon the rights that are protected in the Constitution and Bill of Rights. Well, we have the means by which to enact violence at that point. So I think when we start pussyfooting around with the friendly, just gentle language, you really get into a tangent. You really start getting away from what the heart of this position actually is. And that's part of the reason why nobody knows how to have a strong conversation anymore. It's that we're so worried about triggering people and offending people with the transparency or authenticity of our messaging, that a lot of people aren't used to seeing that and dealing with it. I was on a coaching session earlier, and what I was describing was, my coaching student was having an issue speaking to an individual who basically either was bitching and moaning or didn't want to engage at all. Almost as if there is this dichotomy. There is, I lose my mind and my temper, and this is when discussing topics of levity, serious topics, things that are going on where it might be a tense conversation. You'll have some people that they just lose their mind, or they just avoid, the conversation at all, as if they have no nuance, as if their ability to have a conversation has no sort of a set of has no set of gears that allows you to sort of ramp up the intensity of the delivery of your messaging. And I again would say, when you look at somebody who can't fight, right, or somebody who has either not been in any fights or has not trained, to fight, a lot of overlap between those two things, obviously. You'll see when they are in a fight, or when they are trying to win a fight. We'll put it in that context. When somebody who has never been in a fight or hasn't trained to fight is in a fight and trying to win a fight, you'll see a lot of it is emotional. A lot of it is just batshit crazy. I am going to have a seizure, a violent seizure, and hopefully the other guy is hurt at the end of it. As opposed to somebody who's either been in a lot of fights or somebody who has trained to fight, there's a little bit more tact. That sort of working memory component of the brain is online and staying engaged, and they're making decisions. And, there's a lot more strategy and a lot less emotion, a lot less catharsis. Well, when people aren't used to having strong conversations, you have that same type of dynamic where you have individuals who can't have a tough conversation because they've never been in tough conversations, and they've never even done the training to prepare themselves for tough conversations. So you wind up not having a skillful, tactful, strategic, logic-based, processed, discussion. You wind up having a shouting match, or just a barrage of playing catch with insults and stuff, and it winds up being not even worth one's while. So I will say, when it comes to this discussion of guns and gun control, and it's like there's not, and obviously this is going to reveal my bias, which I acknowledge, but I have not yet seen the argument that suggests the Second Amendment and the rights that gives, or not gives, but protects among citizens, has somehow become obsolete. Like, as if we've moved past that, right? There's an argument that, hey, listen, if we are in a pool, right, a city pool, are there still city pools? But we're in a pool, whatever. And there's a bunch of people there, let's say 200 people in this pool. Should somebody have their firearm with them? I'm going to say maybe not, right? I'm going to say probably not a practical thing to do. So therein lies a scenario where there is a logical process that leads me to conclude that if I'm in a pool, I should not have my firearm with me. Makes sense. And, the rights and, the Bill of Rights, the Constitution and whatnot, any other shootings, that almost doesn't even, it's not even relevant. We don't need to get there. It's just a logic-based, we're in water, we're trying to swim, how do we protect it? It just becomes a shit show. So I think even the most, ardent supporter of the ability to bear arms and the right of an individual to bear arms has some concessions to make, that there are scenarios whereby they should not have their pistol on them, right? I think when facing that type of process, I've just never been presented one that says, yeah, you know what, you're right. We should create stricter gun laws. We should, or modify the Second Amendment. You get the people that say that. So it's not this, I'm, planted in the sand in this one position, and I'm not going to move. And no matter what information comes across, discussion to me, like, I'm not going to be open-minded. That's not it at all. I just have never seen the information. I've never seen the information that suggests that that's something I should consider. And when it comes to why, why does a person need a gun? Well, in case, the government becomes tyrannical. There are police, and what if you have to shoot police? Oh, but you can't talk like that. Well, no, I can talk like that, because imagine the type of government whereby the police are now doing violence against people, against their constitutional rights. What would you have individuals do? What would you have individuals do? You're a man, you're out with your wife, and a police officer starts accosting and fondling your wife. He assaults her. He then assaults you. he puts her in handcuffs, and he gets you and tells you, put these handcuffs on. Like, at what point do you fight? At what point does the position that you've always held your entire life, that this is, a representative of the law, this is, the authority, at what point do you say, well, no, those alliances are being severed, closer and closer, and now all of those alliances are gone, and this is a man, I'm a man, this is my wife, and I'm going to do whatever I can to navigate this situation successfully, including, up to and including violence. Like, there's just a certain point where none of those scenarios whereby an individual citizen having a firearm is necessary, none of those scenarios are without precedent, are, not supported, obviously, with the legislation that we have, the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. So what winds up happening is you have a shooting, right? And violence is ubiquitous. Violence is everywhere. It's pervasive. It is, it's been a part of our society, for forever, and will always be a part of our society so long as individuals have the freedom to be individuals, right? But all of that violence, when exposed to that, when people who don't have a relationship with violence, or people who don't understand the sort of the context, the both historical, cultural, logical context of why individuals should have the ability to bear arms, when those people are then exposed to high levels of violence, of course there is a deficit. There's this emotional trauma that the individual seeks to appease. Very normal process of managing, trauma and anxiety. And that is what happens when politicians take, like the Uvalde shooting and start to leverage it into gun control proposal that, of course, like, you look at the things that are in the bill, none of them would have stopped the shooting from happening. When you look at the individuals who who have done these shootings in the past, like, there are millions of guns in circulation in the United States. There's always going to be the ability to get a gun. And I say always in the, the context of, what would it look like if we were to get rid of every single gun? It's just logistically ridiculous. And when you factor in that there is, we have a multi-party system of government, right? This, this democratic republic, this one party in power and then another party in power, who's to say that at most it's just not going to go back and forth, as different parties take control. It's just, it's really ridiculous at this point. I'm somebody who was raised in the city, and in New York City, and I understand what it's like to be raised without gun culture. I understand what it's like to be raised, without an understanding of what a responsibly armed citizen looks like, what somebody who has a firearm or multiple firearms in their home, how that functions, successfully. And I will say, historically, looking at the history of the United States, it's, I'm in the minority there. I'm somebody who is not the norm when it comes to, this society, or this more peripheral society in New York City that didn't have citizens with guns. That wasn't a thing, like, I can understand how there are so many people who are raised like that have a bias that they're not even, acknowledging, that they're not even articulating in their positions. It's really, why would we need guns? Well, you're only saying that because you were raised in an environment where, number one, guns weren't there. So the fact of, or the idea of having a gun and running a pistol every day, like, that's foreign to you to begin with. And number two, you are in a society that is densely populated. I would say, by definition, all cities are overpopulated when it comes to the cultural effect of what that looks like. But you're not only not familiar with it, but you're also somebody who is protected by a presence of government agents that, to the best of your experience and your recollection of what you've been through, has worked out for you. So the idea of police being bad, the idea of the government becoming tyrannical one day, like this isn't something you're even willing to consider in your position. If you're somebody who's, railing on about, when the Bill of Rights were written, it took minutes in between rounds, and you had the muskets, and that's not these high capacity, that like all of that is nonsense. All of that is nonsense. There's a reason why the Bill of Rights were not written with that level of specificity. It's because the spirit of what they were trying to protect and preserve, in the culture of the United States was the intention. So let me see what's going on. What's going on, folks? Jay Crusser, what's going on, my man? Good to see you. John Wiley, what up? Corey, what's up, my man? Good afternoon. Mr. Cohen in the house. Crusser says a firearm is a tool like a fire extinguisher. It is also an inanimate object. Absolutely. And it happens to be the inanimate object that the would-be tyrants, really don't want us to have. So, when you look at all the tyrants, they don't want their citizens to have firearms. That's like a constant. Every single, chapter in American history, and it's on its way to becoming what I would argue the greatest country in the history of society itself, there has been that protection of the right to have arms. The saying, an armed society is a polite society, is something that I completely agree with. And when you don't know who's doing what, when you don't know what's what individuals are capable of what, you tend to be a little bit more conscious of where your footprint ends and theirs begins as you're moving through society, as it should be. Not that the threat of violence should be lingering over everybody, but it certainly should have a seat at the table when we're discussing, well, what is it, that we should be doing to make sure that we are productive members of society. I say, if there is a list, on that list should be respecting the individual rights of the people around us. And an individual's ability to protect that, is certainly the logical, extension of that. Yes, great point, Judge Cohen. Gestapo or police, So listen, I train law officers. I am friends with many, officers. LEO is a gamut of individuals. But again, I don't even need to talk about individuals if I'm talking about the historicity, the precedent of police being the arm of a tyrannical regime. People getting black bagged in the middle of the night, etc. Like these are things that, like, we know this, right? There's so many people in our society that really want us to know about, the tyranny of our history, some tyrannies over others. And, you have this basic idea of, well, when the government is tyrannical, what are the things that they do to the citizens? What are the citizens allowed to do? This isn't fucking fantasy land. This is, you can read a history book, and check that out, and it'll inform you of why individuals need firearms. Judge says police are only as good as the men who wear the uniform. Quality varies. Absolutely. Absolutely. And, it's, there's a reason why, and I've said, I don't want to get into this big topic, but, you can't legislate morality. One of the reasons for that is that people are going to do the right thing. But what that right thing is always going to be informed by the norm or the normal distribution of people's behavior in a given group. What's the right thing to do oftentimes is what the normal thing to do is. And the legislation of a society, right, the rules and regulations, the laws, are there to incentivize the deviants from whatever that norm is to work towards compliance, right? There's some people who don't rape people because it's wrong. There are some people who don't rape people because it's illegal, right? So, and there's some people who are going to rape people no matter what, right? So the laws really don't, have a lot of say as to what this morality is that transcends whatever the people, populating the society say about it. So again, one of the great things about the Constitution is that it's a transcendent document. It is something that is out of our direct reach. So it allows us to sort of be led in a way that follows the vision of the architects of that Constitution. Right. Oscar, what's going on, my man? Oscar says, I want a box of grenades. It's like if you want to have a talk about like should people have bazookas? Should people have this and that? Well, I mean, I don't know. Should they? Should they? Who's the one that says they get to have it? Who's the one that says they should or should not? What gives them that authority? Like use the box of grenades example. I put a box of grenades in your house. Like you're going to start throwing it all over the place. You're going to start, killing people with grenades. Obviously that's not the case. So the fact that somebody has the tool for different levels of violence doesn't say anything about their intent to use it, to do it. I'm one who really thinks that if you're somebody who is batshit crazy, and whatever that criteria is, that's one of the few positions I have that I don't think I want you to have a firearm. I don't think I want you to have a gun, a rifle, or anything of that effect. Now, again, that is the one I would say mushy part of my position on it, because I honestly, admittedly, I've never really sat down and created some sort of, structured protocol as to who falls on one side of the line, who falls on the other. I think if somebody is, let's just say severe paranoid schizophrenic, maybe a society's better off if that person doesn't have a firearm. If that is on the other side of the line, I'm not sure, and I'm not willing to just sit here and off the top of my head say where that line should be. But that's the one thing that I would say a lot of my, constitutional purists, differ, is that I think it's reasonable for a society to say that if somebody is, if we know somebody is unable to differentiate between reality, and the fantasies, the voices, the, whatever their experience is, then maybe we should make sure that they don't have the ability to start shooting at the aliens that are flying in front of their face every day, whatever. But then you have people who want to make it sort of reasonable that, we have a red flag laws. Let's take that, for example. And you'll find a lot of, politicians, even Republican politicians who have served in the military, at one point or another, talking about the reasonableness of a red flag law. And I don't understand how, if you are somebody who supports the Second Amendment, that you could say that there should be a process that basically allows somebody to experience a consequence without being proven guilty of having done anything wrong. It's the witch trials sort of dynamic. And I just, I don't understand how somebody thinks that won't be misused. And this is, I think, another point where this is concerned. A lot of these, I wish it could be like this. I wish it could be like that. Saying I wish it could be like this, or I think somebody who, in my case, who is paranoid, schizophrenic, and dysfunctional, I think that person should not have a firearm. That is also an aside from, I think the government should somehow regulate this effectively. Like that is a whole nother question that's answered. So the individuals that have all these abilities to come to these great, just moral positions and ideals, and this is the people shouldn't have weapons of war. People shouldn't have this, like all these fucking nonsensical ramblings. even if you wanted to concede any of the points they make, which I absolutely do not, but even if you did, well, then it begs the question, well, who the fuck is going to do it? Is it going to be the government? The government that that takes turns, spanning the spectrum from inept to corrupt. Like what is it exactly that you think? What button you could press where this magically happens? There needs to be a process, and the logistics of taking the government that fucks just about everything up. Like to put them in a position where they're supposed to carry out this moral position you have without it losing any of its identity in the process. Like that's fucking ridiculous. Big Matt says, what's up, Matt? He says, if you're a battleship, maybe batshit crazy, you can't own a firearm. So all blue-haired cat ladies, right? So obviously, and if there's a line, blue-haired cat lady, maybe she should be spending her money on other things, but it is, obviously the more extreme types of mental illness and just dysfunction. Those are the individuals I'm talking about. People like who are in a catatonic state, or people who are just completely dysfunctional, maybe even institutionalized. If they somehow snap out of their condition momentarily and say, I want to buy a firearm, I think all of us would be safe going, yeah, you know what, we'll talk about it, and just go back to La La Land, wherever the hell you were. And I think that that's one of the things, again, that still says nothing of my trust in a government to carry that out effectively. Some people don't know, I've said it before, I'm not a supporter of the death penalty, because it's a government operation. Do I think that, like, you kill somebody in my family, I'm going to do everything in my power to kill you? Just FYI, put that in your fucking box. So there's a difference in what I'm talking about here. When I say I don't support the death penalty, just the phrasing, the death penalty, support the death penalty, that is a commentary on government, on what I think the government should be doing. Why? Because if one person is unjustly put to death because of the process, which we know is going to be flawed, I would just as soon do away with the whole thing. I'm not a supporter of stop and frisk, and apparently there were, I don't know if it was the Supreme Court of the United States or if it was a state Supreme Court or something that said that the stop and frisk policy that Giuliani used was constitutional. But I will disagree. I disagree. I know that if I'm walking down the street and a bunch of guys, plainclothes cops, jump out of a car and try to put me up against the wall and start searching me, it's going to be a problem, and it's going to be a problem because there's no, probable cause. They don't have PC to do that. They don't have something that they could argue in a courtroom setting that warrants them infringing on my rights, saying I fit the profile, saying, we had a report of somebody that looked just like you and all this stuff. I mean, these are tricks that cops have been using forever, but to have a policy that says it's okay, to go and just stop people who look suspicious to you or whatever the criteria happen to be, I can't support that. I can't support that, and that's I would say, again, the issue with, being so quick to legislate morality. There's always going to be an offset between what the intention of the proposed legislation is and what the outcome, once it's installed into the bureaucratic, just machine that is government, they're always going to make something ugly. That's what they do. So it's one of those things where, well, what are we going to do? We're going to sit here and just say, well, we're going to give the authorities the ability to do all these different things and just hope they follow the rules, hope they don't infringe on people's rights. Like, what is it? Absolute power corrupts absolutely. This is human nature. And we have to protect people from themselves. And part of that is making sure they don't have a disproportionate, disparate level of authority over, their fellow citizens. Okay, here's Oscar just talking incredibly irresponsibly on the internet. I support taking someone out back and putting one in him for violating my town, although it is Pride Month, so we don't want to jump to any conclusions. That's what he's talking about. Judge Cohen says lunatics are already accounted for in the idea of sound mind and able-bodied, and this is absolutely the point that I make. It's I think if we're having, not even a legal discussion, if we're just having a logical discussion, a discussion that's, a philosophical discussion, I guess we could say, are we going to sit here and say that there's a certain number of people, that once a group grows to that number, the individuals no longer should have rights? Like I'm somebody who universally will say there is no such number. When you read Tribalnomics, I talk about self-alliance. I talk about an individual's alliance with himself and how there is this ongoing process of working to create more overlap between the pure self and the real self. And, if you haven't read the book, then you should, and those terms will make more sense. But without individuals who are squared away, without individuals who have done the work necessary to find out who they are and what they're about, who is society filled with when we have this group alliance between all these individuals? Who are the individuals making the alliance in the first place? So there cannot be a point where a tribe grows to a scale where the individual no longer matters, because it is implicit in what we see a tribe as being, a collection of individuals. The tribe, although an identity of its own, it is not an identity that supplants the existence of the individuals that make it up. It is just a sort of categorization that occurs on a different scale, right? So when you look at people now in this spoiled, surplus-laden society, it's like they have so much free time. They have so much time to sort of dedicate to abstraction and fantasy. And it's a testament to the success of the country that it could simultaneously take care of so many pets. But when we look at the rights of the individual, there's also an accountability at the individual scale that occurs at the same time. So if you're somebody who thinks that I think that everybody should have the right to do this, or everybody should not have the right to do this, and when you look at its application, there's inconsistency. That means that you are saying that some people should have a right that other people don't. And I can go on and on. I feel like I'm fucking rambling here, but it's the same old fucking recurring nonsense. You have weak, incapable, inept, lonely, so oftentimes narcissistic individuals trying to tell everybody else how to live. And it's just, you look at what Biden's doing to the U.S. right now. It's like, yeah, we kind of told you this was going to happen. We kind of told you this is going to happen. And then, you have people say, well, Trump was the worst. Trump was this. Like, listen, if you supported Hillary Clinton, then when she was running against Trump, you should have voted for Hillary. But if you weren't supporting either one of them, you could say that Trump, I think it was at the time, and then, yeah, you could debate this. But at the time, I felt it was pretty easy, to look at when preserving the rights of individuals, to say that Trump was the better choice. When it came to Trump and Biden, I think it's a much easier choice to make. Election shenanigans aside, because I'm not really somebody who who argues that a lot on the internet, but I'll be damned if Joe Biden got the greatest fucking number of votes in history. But when that election was happening, it's like, what did you think that Biden was going to do? Biden has been deteriorating cognitively. He has been a wishy-washy, flip-flopping politician for as long as he's been in government. Then he chose Kamala Harris to be the vice president, the lady that literally nobody liked, but was probably the biggest whore of all the people available to be vice president. Pretty much do what we want, and we'll tell you what to do every day, and everything will be fine, and you get to be vice president. She is phony as can be, and will absolutely abided by that. But it's like to argue that what Trump was doing or what Trump would have done would have been worse than what Biden would have done. Like, well, we had Trump there, and you just have, again, this is the people who they want to argue about, how he made people feel. They want to argue about all these things that have no bearing on what we're experiencing now. It's like, gas. I just filled up, one of my vehicles in a minivan, a Honda Odyssey, $119. $119. My kid just went to go get haircuts. It was like $30 fucking haircut. I was asking my wife, what did they get? Fucking highlights? But and I don't blame, the barber, obviously. Everybody is now dealing with this inflation issue. Everybody's dealing with these shortages. I was just in a local supermarket, right, buying my monsters. And as I'm in this supermarket, there are so many bare shelves. It reminds me of when, as a kid, I went to Puerto Rico once. And I don't have great memories of going to Puerto Rico, but I remember this one, that this is not a great one, but being in a market, and for the first time looking and seeing that like all the shelves they had didn't have stuff on them. And it was almost like it every day you went, it was almost like the day before the supplies got here, the day before the truck showed up. Like, that's what every day looked like. And I swear I had this recollection being in the store earlier this morning, where I was in the store and there was, empty shelves. And I'm like, what the fuck is happening? And I've lived here, over 6 years. Like, it's never been like this, but at least he's not being mean to people. Like, this is the conversation that people wanted to have when Trump was president, and the thing is, to them, that was the thing that was relevant then. But to the people who were looking at them like they were fucking retarded, we always knew, like, at least he wasn't fucking this up. Like, at a minimum, that was the case. Trump's an egomaniac. Trump's like, so? Trump's a narcissist. So? Trump is arrogant and he's so? That's not what we fucking hired him for. I don't know. Let's see what you guys are saying over here. I appreciate you guys participating. All right. Judge Cohen says, think about a governor on the throttle of an engine. It baffles me how people fail to understand this. A little is good for long-term operation. More than that impedes performance. There's I think this is connected to his other post. The definition of government is restriction of freedom, right? So I've often said the Constitution is the compromise. That is the compromise that we all agree to participate as citizens, as fellow citizens in this country. The Constitution. I would say if I wanted a society that resembled my values, it would look differently than this. As any individual, watching this, it's going to be the same thing. If they had a society that reflected the type of lifestyle and preferences that they have, it would be different than the one we have. But we all agree to participate in this compromise, right? And I think, the history of the United States proves that that's a good idea at this point. Even now, there needs to be, the I think the U.S. this part sucks and that is obsolete and this shouldn't be there anymore. Well, compared to what? And if you are suggesting or offering a different way for the government to be, then you have to at least concede that you are sharing an abstraction, you are sharing a conceptual, truth, whereas we have a track record of things that already work, and you would have to trump that, no pun intended, before we could say that this is worth a shot. I remember watching, I think it was Jordan Peterson a couple of years ago. And I like Jordan Peterson. I have a lot of criticisms of him on certain topics. Other topics, when he's talking about, the cross-dressing thing and, various other topics, like he is fucking, there's nobody better. But I recall him on a podcast once talking about, society working to remove the suffering, in life, around the world, to remove the suffering. And I just thought that was a bit presumptuous. Like, who's to say that suffering isn't something that allows us to, build ourselves to what we've become in the first place? Where would we be without the suffering, right? What was that cartoon? Wall-E, I think it was Wall-E, where the people that they showed in that animated movie, like they had these little gliding things, like these little gliding scooters that they didn't have to walk, and they were all fat and like their bones couldn't withstand the the weight of their bodies and stuff. And it's like, that's the process, right? That's the process. It's always going to be, there's always going to be two sides of the coin, two sides of the experience. We know what cold is because we know what hot is. It's like to say one could exist without the other is an impossibility, because there would be no, like there is no heads without a tails on a coin. You can't have one side without the other. It is implied. We could choose to observe one or the other, but they both exist almost simultaneously. So when you have, the opposite of suffering, which is pleasure, elation, fulfillment, whatever you want to put on the other end of it, well, suffering is the thing that makes that real. There is no satisfaction or fulfillment or happiness without its opposite. Like, that is part of it, right? It's like if you've become, if you're somebody who goes to the gym and you lift weights and you become stronger, not only would you not have become stronger without those weights, but you also, at the end of the process, or at a further point in the process, have to acknowledge a gratitude for the weights. Saying the world, we could work one day to have no suffering, is like saying, well, we should be able to work one day to have muscles without having to lift weights. It's like, well, what would the value of the muscles be? What would be the assumption? Like, it would be fraudulent, because it's that process that produces the effect. So I don't know. Let's go down. Oh man, I'm going to call you Russell, because I don't know if it's J.K. Russell or J. Crussell. J.K. Russell. It might be Russell. I don't fucking know. Russell, you're getting Russell. MC, what are your thoughts on universal carry permit versus leaving it up to each state? So here's the thing. I would really love nothing more than the Supreme Court to say that a carry permit is a constitutional right based on the Bill of Rights and Second Amendment. And that would be a federal protection for an individual's right to carry a firearm. I think that what that process looks like to get from here to there is one that will never be traversed I say never in context. It's like, who knows, what the future brings, but I just don't see that happening anytime soon. So for me, I like the smaller, almost building the foundation of law in the Supreme Court, opinions and and findings that they sort of chip away at all of the elements that the ne'er-do-wells look to use to build an opposition to the Second Amendment. I like when they're saying that that number one, an individual's right to carry a firearm, and when the terminology is militia. Like that's something that we need to understand right off the bat. We need to have these smaller victories because it undermines, like I said, the elements of many of the cases that oppose it. So, universal carry permit, universal carry permit, universal, which implies the United States, right? So, universal in that sense. Carry, obviously, to carry, open, close, that, that's up for discussion. Anybody who says, we should open carry, if there's somebody I care about, I say, that's retarded. You should be, carrying concealed. If I don't know who they are, I just give them a thumbs up, right on. All right, so the bad guys come in, that's the guy running around with a target. But it's more of a tactical position than anything. But so universal carry and then permit. Like that's the thing too. Permit. To get permission. I understand what you're saying. It's just the name of the thing is the permit, not implying that you're using special language, but just, to just look at what exactly we're discussing, getting permission from the government to protect your family. It's just one of those things that, like, we just have to build a relationship with who we are as an individual and scale out from there. It is not illegal to break the law. It's never going to be illegal to break the law. It's illegal to get caught breaking the law. That's a distinction people need to make when they're building a relationship with what laws actually are. Because you have these people that will sit there in shock when somebody breaks the law in a way that, that doesn't warrant any consequences. Like, how do they get away with it? They keep like, well, what do you think? I'll share again. I've referenced the scene in The Princess Bride. When the Count Rugen, I think it is taking the dread pirate Roberts Wesley to the pit of despair, and he had just finished telling the princess that he was going to bring Wesley to his ship, and as soon as the princess leaves, Count Rugen, the bad guy, looks at the dread pirate Roberts and says, come, we must bring you to your ship. And dread pirate Roberts says, we're both men of action. Lies do not become us. And there's a point where when people know what the deal is, men of action, when men of action discuss these things, we're under no delusions that somehow there's this fantasy land we live in that just because it's illegal, nobody's going to do it. And a lot of people on the left, a lot of people who are, scared or phobic of firearms and guns and gun culture, a lot of times that's what they operate from, this fantasy land. This, well, wouldn't it be nice sort of, position. That's the premise that everybody starts with. Wouldn't it be nice if, and you could sit there and talk all day about what it would be nice if, but then when it comes to the actual logistics of installing that and making that happen, and regulating it, carrying it out, maintaining it, like it's a completely different story. But people, men of action, we understand that you can't separate those two. Can't separate those two. What's up, Derek? Good to see you. Right. In general, I'm not a fan of government giving us permission, but I have seen plenty of morons getting their carry permit with little or no training. Well, here's the thing, and I don't know, maybe this is where we deviate in our positions on this, but I don't care if somebody has little or no training. I don't care. You know, I don't think that that's implied. Uh, let me offer a position. Rather than getting into the semantics or the legalese, not that I'm a fucking lawyer, but talking about the actual how the Second Amendment makes no reference to training. Some people try to say the fact that it says militia implies, like, no, it has nothing to say about training. What I will say is I want firearms in the hands of every responsible American citizen. Because maybe there will be a scenario, or it is very well possible to have a scenario whereby training will happen, for the individual, should something happen to the government on a bigger scale. It's like, let the government just take a turn for the worse. And then all these people who haven't done any training, they don't have firearms because they wanted to make sure they had training before they got them. Like, I would rather have those people, lock their firearms safely in their homes in whatever capacity they need to until they get training, than tell them they can't have a firearm until they get training. And that's the thing on that. I'd rather people have them on hand. I think that somebody enters your house from the government to steal one of your children. I'm going out there, but it's hypothetical. I think, if you don't have a firearm, you'll take a knife, but you've had no knife training. You'll take a fucking hammer. You might not be a carpenter. Like, there's just a certain thing where having tools of violence, when violence is warranted, should be something that people have access to. I also know I've seen people on gun ranges that have a shit ton of training and are more fucking dangerous because they think they're fucking cowboys than the person who has a gun and maybe is intimidated by it, and uses it and under manipulates it, than the guy who's fucking showing off his latest sexy gear, fucking flagging everybody on a fucking range, thinking he's fucking Wild Bill Hickok. So I think that I understand the sentiment, and I would say that I would encourage people, with a carry permit to go and get training. I would encourage them to become as responsible through that training that they possibly can. But I am not somebody who says that there's some sort of training, because it's going to be training that's somehow regulated by the government. It's like, everybody needs to shoot this qual. Everybody does it. Then the government says everybody needs to shoot this qual, and then do a backflip. It's like, because people should be able to do a backflip if they're going to handle a gun. It's like the government can create, the fucking wall as high as they want to. As soon as we agree there should be a wall, So what else? And to that, he says, I would love to see more training, but it seems most fall in love with gear than skills. Absolutely. Absolutely. I don't know how to farm, right? Shit hits the fan. I hope everybody in my area has done a bunch of farming, and so I will allow the viewers to use that analogy applied to firearms. Everything is a potential tool of violence if your head is correct. Yeah, I just got finished teaching this weekend the Modern Warrior Conference, right? And it's the third year we're doing this, and it's myself, two on Tom Kyer, two on Harley Elmore, and Bill Rapier from Amtac Shooting. Just a fucking powerhouse of instructors that I get to work with, and particularly during two on Harley's teaching block this weekend. He went over this sort of concept of having a hub of options, in a conflict, and how they can go in different directions. And, you sit down for that talk that Tuan and Harley gave, and the average citizen will realize that this is so much bigger than a gun. This is so much bigger than just having a firearm. It's just that the people who are trained, it's very hard to train beyond the power or capabilities of a firearm if the government has them and people don't. It's not that it's not doable. It's just that they know it'll be a lot easier to tell us what to do if we don't have firearms. And one of the reasons being, even untrained people can make a firearm work most of the time. Moving the goalposts of training, that's exactly right, and that's what they'll do. Farming, I know Oscar's into farming, and it's one of the things growing up in the Bronx. There were the products of farming, but there wasn't a lot of farming itself. My father used to have avocado plants that he'd grow like in windowsills. And as, he got older, he had a little bit more land to do it. He had his little farm, and he'd have his tomatoes, and it was something that he really, really enjoyed doing. I just haven't gotten to that yet, and I absolutely will. But it is one of those things where it's like, why not? But if you're talking about practical, having a farm and growing vegetables and things like that, if shit hits the fan, just understand it's cyclical. Like having a harvest, like you're not doing that, at a pace that transcends, what's required. So sometimes it's like, I got 30 MREs. And once you're out of the MREs, you have nothing. Well, when it comes to farming, if that's the only thing you're relying on, it's like once you're done with the harvest and you've gone through it, like you hope that the things grow again. And I know there are hydroponic systems. There's things to make sure that we could mitigate that timeline, but it's still something that exists, beyond that. So I think long-term sustainability, it's something that people need to do. I think just having the skills itself is something that individuals should embrace, to sort of keep, the natural. In my Function First program, I talk about the natural life, and I talk about the natural ritualed life, and the distinction being, even when we don't have to, we do the things that keep us in touch with the natural skills that will maintain our autonomy should the glass on this aquarium we live in break. A sliding scale of potential options to use is a great thing to have. And that's the thing. That's the thing. If you have one option, then that's what you're going to do. If your only option, if you're a man and you have a wife, you have children, you're the protector of your home, and you have somebody who's looking to do you guys harm. If you haven't done any violence training, if you haven't armed yourself, your option is to call the police. And a lot of times that's going to work. The threat of being able to call the police will actually disincentivize a lot of people from doing what they otherwise would. But what happens in that scenario where the person doing you harm is the police? Who do you call them? Fucking Ghostbusters? Oh my God. Big Matt says, raise goats and chickens and plant, I'm assuming, fruit trees. Yeah, I think meat's the way to go. Meat's the way to go. We're going to, before the end of the year, we're going to, at my property here in PA, we're going to get a chicken coop and start getting some chickens. My buddy Ryan, shout out to my boy Ryan's got goats now. And that's another level. I gotta get the chickens done the way we're first and get that handled. But who'd have thought that these are the things I'd be doing? Here I am, a kid raised in the Bronx, during the 80s. But I'm going to leave it there, guys. Good talk. I appreciate you guys. MasterChim.com, that's the email newsletter. It's free. Go and do that. I'm here every Wednesday, noon Eastern time, for the Wednesday Warrior stream. And I appreciate you guys. Talk to you guys soon.